In the movies, we were treated to a lovely representation of the Ents. However, due to the necessarily shortened version of the story for the big screen, aspects of the Ents that are more well-defined in the books were somewhat omitted. Furthermore, the book described in detail some of the inner monologues of Treebeard in such a way that he seems not only more wise, but the humor surrounding him goes beyond the obvious laughs about how long conversations can take. In fact, when reading those scenes in the books, one finds oneself smiling at the wisdom of the story and of Treebeard, as well as of the story's humor and Treebeard's humor. We first met Treebeard in the Two Towers when Merry and Pippin come across him after they escape the Uruk-hai and the orcs of Mordor. It becomes apparent that the Entish language is excruciatingly long, and it seems that conversations in it could potentially take up to years. While this is certainly funny to a degree in the movie, it does not take away from Treebeard's wisdom, and in the movies we can see that he truly is ancient and very wise, but we cannot really wrap our minds around his wisdom. In the books, though, this is more well-defined. Here is a quote from Pippin describing Treebeard's eyes in the Two Towers. "One felt as if there was an enormous well behind them, filled with ages of memory and long, slow, steady thinking. But their surface was sparkling with the present, like sun shimmering on the outer leaves of a vast tree, or the ripples of a very deep lake." There is also a description of Treebeard's true name when the hobbits ask it. He, unlike Merry and Pippin, was not so hasty as to give out his full name, and said this: "I am not going to tell you my name, not yet at any rate." A queer, half-knowing, half-humorous look came with a green flicker into his eyes. "For one thing, it would take a long while. My name is growing all the time, and I've lived a very long, long time, so my name is like a story. Real names tell you the story of the things they belong to in my language, in old Entish, as you might say. It is a lovely language, but it takes a very long time saying anything in it, because we do not say anything in it unless it is worth taking a long time to say and to listen to." Later still, the Entish language is described as a music, and sometimes a chant, lending to its beauty. So the name of an Ent is not just a word, but the summation of its deeds and its story. Treebeard could have feasibly been alive since shortly after the awakening of the elves, thousands and thousands of years ago. In the books, he is one of the oldest in the entire world, being a creature very close to the natural world and able to take joy in nature's little wonders, would lead Treebeard to include what we would perceive as minor deeds as great. For example, a bumblebee landing on his beard 2,000 years ago would need to be taken into account when understanding his story, and therefore his name. His name is his story. Also, it is not simply other beings that get this treatment in the language, but many aspects of the world itself. In the Two Towers, there is a point where Treebeard forgets the word hill because he does not frequently use the common tongue. And the quote is, "Hill, yes, that was it, but it was a hasty word for a thing that has stood here ever since this part of the world was shaped." So the word hill is one syllable and cannot possibly encompass the story of that place. The storms weathered, the bushes and the trees uprooted, the animals grazing. So to understand the Ents, one must see that it is not just that their words are incredibly long with many syllables. Rather, they take their time with their descriptions, so that the full gravity of something's beauty is appreciated. I think the quote about the hill is one of my favorites, because with that one sentence, the mind conjures up images of many ages and things long past, the shaping of the land and the changing of the life upon it. A beautiful idea that makes the Ents not just more relatable, but puts their wisdom in perspective. I'll end with a quote from the Silmarillion. After Aulë, the smith, forged the dwarf fathers, Yavanna, queen of all things that grow, perceived that they would have little love for her works, and also that her realm would be always under the dominion of others. So she went to Manway, and the following occurred. "Because my heart is anxious, thinking of the days to come. All my works are dear to me. Is it not enough that Melkor should have marred so many? Shall nothing that I have devised be free from the dominion of others? If thou hadst thy will, what wouldst thou reserve? Said Manwë. Of all thy realm, what dost thou hold dearest? All have their worth, said Yavanna, and each contributes to the worth of the others. But the Kelvar can flee or defend themselves, whereas the Ulvar that grow cannot. And among these I hold trees dear. Long in the growing, swift shall they be in the felling, and unless they pay toll with fruit upon bough, little mourned in their passing. So I see in my thought, would that the trees might speak on behalf of all things that have roots, and punish those that wrong them. This is a strange thought, said Manwë. Yet it was in the song, said Yavanna. For while thou wert in the heavens, and with Ulmo built the clouds and poured out the rains, I lifted up the branches of great trees to receive them, and some sang to Iluvatar amid the wind and the rain. Then Manwë sat silent, and the thought of Yavanna that she had put into his heart grew and unfolded, and it was beheld by Iluvatar. Then it seemed to Manwë that the song rose once more about him, and he heeded now many things therein, that though he had heard them he had not heeded before. And at last the vision was renewed, but it was not now remote, for he was himself within it, and yet he saw that all was upheld by the hand of Iluvatar, and the hand entered in, and from it came forth many wonders that had until then been hidden from him in the hearts of the Ainur. Then Manwë awoke, and he went down to Yavanna upon Ezelohar, and he sat beside her beneath the two trees. And Manwë said, O Kementari, Eru hath spoken, saying, Do then any of the Valar suppose that I did not hear all the song, even the least sound of the least voice? Behold, when the children awake, then the thought of Yavanna will awake also, and it will summon spirits from afar, and they will go among the Kelvar and the Ulvar, and some will dwell therein, and be held in reverence, and their just anger shall be feared, for a time, while the firstborn are in their power, and while the secondborn are young. But dost thou not now remember, Kementari, that thy thought sang, not always done? Did not thy thought and mine meet also, so that we took wing together like great birds that soar above the clouds? That also shall come to be by the heed of Iluvatar. And before the children awake, there shall go forth with wings like the wind the eagles of the lords of the west. Then Yavanna was glad, and she stood up, reaching her arms toward the heavens, and she said, I shall climb the trees of Kementari, that the eagles of the king may house therein. But Manwë rose also, and it seemed that he stood to such a height that his voice came down to Yavanna from the paths of the winds. Nay, he said, only the trees of Aulë will be tall enough. In the mountains the eagles shall house, to hear the voices of those who call upon us, but in the forests shall walk the shepherds of the trees. Then Manwë and Yavanna parted for that time, and Yavanna returned to Aulë, and he was in his smithy, pouring molten metal into a mold. Eru is bountiful, she said. Now let thy children beware, for there shall walk a power in the forests, whose wrath they shall arouse at their peril. None the less, they will have need of wood, said Aulë, and he went on with his smithwork.